Welcome to the Video Game Hour here at Nerd HQ. You got lots of cool panels, but you probably saw there was Project Morpheus upstairs. Anyone gone and tried Project Morpheus yet? Yeah. All right. Some of you have tried it, some of you haven't, but I think after this hour you probably will want to learn more about it. Of course, Star Wars Battlefront is up there. So for the next hour, we got a really cool panel with actually the guys that developed Project Morpheus, which is virtual reality, which you've probably heard about. There are lots of different virtual reality systems people are talking about, but Sony has this amazing system called Project Morpheus. We're going to learn a bit about that. We're going to meet some of the creators who are actually making new games and experiences for that, which are really cool, and we'll take your questions as well. So let me introduce our panel. First off, we've got a man who has developed some really cool stuff for PlayStation over the years. You guys probably heard of iToy, that for PlayStation, things like that, the PlayStation camera. Him and his team at the Magic Lab have been a really key part of developing the technology behind this Project Morpheus VR system. So please welcome, it's an honor to have him here, Dr. Richard Marks from PlayStation, the Magic Lab. Dr. Marks, how you doing? Good to see you. Next up, we've got a developer who's working on a very cool game that we're going to show you some footage of. Ben Throop, who's here from Frame Interactive. Ben, come on out. Next up, from the PlayStation team, a guy who I've known a long time. He used to be at Harmonix, who made Rock Band, and now he's working on the director of portfolio strategy. What a title, at Sony Computer Entertainment. Please welcome John Drake. Hey now. And finally, we've got Eka from Uber Entertainment. Come on out, Eka. Also working on a game. So far removed from you guys.
Woo! Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Marks. So let's talk about this Project Morpheus. For people that, most of you probably play games, right? You guys play games? Yeah. All right, good. All right. So lots of people play games, although only a few people here have actually played with Morpheus. So, Dr. Marks, tell us about VR. I think we all hear about it, about how cool it is, and it's a lot of people haven't had a chance to experience it. Why did you guys want to, why was VR something that was important to you at PlayStation from an R&D perspective? Is this the future of games?
It's a future of games. Right. I mean, it's the most immersive kind of experience you could have in gaming. So there's a lot of energy behind it in the engineers and game creators in PlayStation. We've wanted to do it for a long time. The technology hasn't really been up to it. Now we can do it. So actually, we've been working on it a long time in various ways. The tracking technology comes from things we did back, in 1999 is when we did some of the tracking stuff. But then we've been working on it over the years. Now it's just reached this quality bar where when you put it on, the technology is no longer in the way, and it's just up to these experienced guys to be able to create stuff that's awesome for it.
That's right, and games are going to be part of it. There's lots of other cool things. I know you guys are working with NASA on something, and there's lots of experiential stuff. Maybe before we move on, we can just talk a bit about some of the games these guys are working on and show you some trailers so you kind of get a sense of what this looks like, and then we'll get a little more in-depth. Okay, let's maybe start a bit with you and Wayward Sky. So Uber's up in Seattle. You guys have done some really cool games. Tell us, what is this Wayward Sky game? Why did you want to make it for Morpheus?
So I saw the Morpheus demo at GDC, this past GDC, and I was completely blown away. So I was like, I want to get into VR and see what we can do. And Wayward Sky is a third-person adventure game, like a point-and-click adventure game, but instead of having a pointer, you use your head. So you look around in VR, click where you want to go, and you move around and interact.
Should we take a look at a trailer for Wayward Sky? All right, here we go. First look at a Wayward Sky trailer. Let's hope it plays.
Let's do it.
Are you okay?
What is that?
Stay here, Max. Go, run, go. I'll find you.
a look-and-click VR adventure. And what may not be fully evident from when you watch, it's one of the tough things about VR is like you watch a trailer and you think it's a traditional video game, but no, it's like you're actually moving your head around. So you saw a lot of games, you know, you have those two analog sticks and you have to use the right controller to kind of move the camera around. In this game, you can actually, as you move your head, that's sort of the camera. So as you saw the camera tilting around, you actually kind of look around the environment. So VR is one of those things that's really difficult to describe. Yeah, we're going to spend the next 35 minutes describing it to you.
It's going to be great.
All right, moving on to the next one. Ben, your game, Headmaster. Tell us a bit about this before we look at the trailer.
Well, I think that Headmaster is an example of the kind of game that you would never think to do before VR, but now that VR is here, it kind of presented itself. So in Headmaster, you head soccer balls in VR with your actual head. And so the quick pitch is that you are a professional soccer player. You had a bad year, so you've been sent to the Football Improvement Center, which is not a prison. And so, yeah, I think the trailer will speak for a lot of what the game is.
All right, you're going to expect some soccer balls in this trailer, right?
Yeah, and some turkeys.
Turkeys. All right, here we go. 60 seconds.
Round 1. Target score is 40. Begin. During your stay, you will undergo increasingly challenging rounds of heading therapy. Earn at least 1 star to advance to the next round. Your club expects improvement. Do not disappoint them. See you next year.
Needs more turkeys. So these experiences you mentioned, Ben, this is something you're probably not going to play on a regular controller. John, when you're looking at the portfolio strategy of PlayStation, do you obviously want to have some new experiences for something like Morpheus? And that's I assume excites you guys thinking about the different kinds of experiences that can happen. And that's one thing with VR. I think when people hear about it, they're like, oh, what's Uncharted going to be like in VR and things like that. And that's, there probably could be an experience around that, but it feels like this enables new types of creativity, right?
Yeah, I think that's what we look for the most. So my job, because portfolio strategy sort of sounds like an imaginary title, to a degree it is. My job is basically to see games and get excited about them and figure out sort of what everyone else will be excited about when you get a chance to play them. And there's a bunch of games that you'll be able to have a mode in X AAA game, right? That's VR sort of focused and tuned, but you can't just put, you can't just drag Call of Duty over and put it in VR and it magically works. So a lot of these games, especially the two that we showed, are really built from the ground up and they're really intuitive. So when a soccer ball flies at your face and there's a goal in front of you, you know how to go like that. Or when you want to move your character from here to there and there's a cursor, you know to look and hit the button. I think that we're seeing now a lot of custom experiences that really help people get acclimated to what VR is and what it can be. And have some really magical moments, like when the robot is punching you at the end and he falls, you can watch him sort of drift off into the distance, or when you can break a piñata with your face. Because video games, why not? Those are really novel and new experiences, and we have a ton of other games. I know Ubisoft is making Trackmania in VR, and that's a sort of a standard racing game, but really tailored for that experience. And we have stuff ranging from drive a spaceship and dogfight all the way down to run around in a cartoon World War II shooter. And
one of my favorite ones I played at GDC this year is this thing called London Heist.
Yeah,
and
real talk.
That's like intense because you're there as the character, but you're trying to escape this room, and they're gangsters, and you have to duck below these drawers and find a key.
That's a real first-person shooter. It's literally a first-person shooter. It is your face, and that game uses 2 Move controllers. It's our London studio run by Wayward Studios, and yeah, you're being interrogated by this big Jason Statham-looking dude, and he's kind of in your face, and it's the first time in a game, I've been scared before in video games, right? Something jumps out from a corner and you go, oh God, and spill your drink everywhere. But it's the first time I've ever felt intimidated, right?
As you're sitting there in your chair and then you stand up and look him in the eye.
Right.
And someone told me it actually calculates like how tall you are, so it's like you look eye to eye at him.
He stares at you in the eye and hands you a cell phone, and you can hold it to your ear and you hear it, and if you hold it to the other side, it moves around, and the 3D audio is really crazy. It's immersive, which is a really commonly abused word in VR, but it actually makes you feel like you're there to the point where you have to remember that like that desk is not in front of you. Don't try to lift yourself up on it, right? It's a virtual object. Be careful. But yeah, you can play some of that upstairs. We have that in the Getaway, which is sort of sequel where you're in a car and Russian gangsters are trying to take you out on motorcycles and you have to shoot your way to safety, and you probably won't win, so go try it and see if you can beat it.
So there's so many of these cool experiences, and one thing that I found with the VR stuff I've seen so far is that they feel more sort of like short session experiences versus like here's a 30-hour RPG that you're going to be playing fully in VR. Dr. Marks, I wanted to ask you about sort of the trial and error and sort of figuring out like what kind of content works in VR, what doesn't work. I remember a year ago, March at the Game Developers Conference when you guys first revealed Morpheus, you talked a lot about sort of that experimentation. What are are there types of games that work better in VR than others?
Well, you can bring over any world from any kind of existing game into VR, but then what you do in that world usually does need to change from a traditional game. Because you're present in that space, things, some of the games actually have you interact with the things around you directly, and that's surprisingly fun. So like in the Heist Getaway one, you're in a car, but you can like turn the radio knobs and change a channel and open up the glove compartment, and there's a soda in there.
You could open the door and like lean out the side of the car. Don't fall out of the car though.
So it's the it's the mechanic of the game that has to change more than the art or in the world itself.
But there are things obviously where you're in VR, it's immersive. Some people I'm sure are worried about like, oh, I'm going to get sick inside of this. It's taking over my world. It's strange that a lot of games like you're used to pushing on the stick forward for someone to walk. Here, obviously, if you start walking, you're going to run into a wall and things like that. So how do you adapt for that in sort of I guess a little bit in the hardware, but also in just the software? So people, like if you see somewhere you want to go, how do you can't walk, so how do you get there?
Well, it depends on the game again. If you're in a vehicle, then a lot of the traditional controls work great for that. If you're not in a vehicle and you're standing, we have some kind of things where you have something like a flashlight in your hand. You can point in that direction, move in that direction, for example, is a way to do it. But sometimes you don't need to walk. There's a lot of things you can do without walking. A lot of games now on traditional console are about locomotion and moving through worlds, but actually in VR, just being in that place is already a pretty cool experience.
Well, and I think that you talked about play length a little bit. I think it's, maybe these games are 6 or 8 hours long, but you don't want to be in VR for 6 or 8 hours straight. So I think it's that vignette idea of, in the Heist, you're transported to sort of a flashback and you have to fight your way out of this scene. And that actually lends itself really well to you're in a set piece and you don't need to run around the room. You're here and you're behind cover trying to defend yourself, and then you can transport back and sort of flash back and forth. A lot of games are using that to be a 10-minute to 15-minute play experience, and then take a short break and go to the next one, which is nice.
Yeah. Also, we're showing these to as many people as we can, as often as we can. So we try to target a 5-minute experience so that we can let a lot of people try it. We can't really let people stay there for a long time. So all of the experiences right now are like that because they kind of have to be like that.
I also like that it creates the opportunity for smaller teams and developers to sort of jump into VR. And this is, we love Naughty Dog and Gorilla and a lot of the big studios. And, I know Gorilla's working on something in VR. But it seems like, smaller companies like Uber can sort of get involved, jump in. It feels like the barriers to entry aren't as great as you might think to be able to, like, make a VR game. Maybe if you guys can talk, and Ben too, a little bit about, like, you guys as a studio, like building a VR game, what is that like? I mean, what are the challenges of starting out on a little experimental game like this when the hardware's not even out yet? So you're just sort of it's really, I assume it's experimental and fun to start, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the first 3-4 months, we're still experimenting, but the first 3-4 months is like figuring out what you can do, what you can't do. I'm pretty sensitive to motion sickness, which is an issue some people have if it's not designed properly for it. I mean, you're talking about taking a Call of Duty or something like that and putting it in VR, that's going to make people sick. You can't just run around.
If you don't adapt it and make
Exactly. So figuring out what those design parameters are, like that's what we spend a lot of time doing is just experimenting with it.
Right, because you could have done Wayward Sky as like, first person on the ground, but you're doing, it's much cooler about using your head to sort of turn around, but then I assume you still have a controller there and you're guiding the character.
Right. Well, so we have two methods. We can use a traditional controller or the move controller. With the move controller, you can actually just point in the world and click. And the character moves around, and the way you navigate the space is we cut between cameras and as you navigate a big area. Yeah.
Now, Ben, Headmaster feels like that's a game that can only be done in VR, or at least most effectively done in VR. Sure. That concept, was that just naturally popped in your head as soon as you saw Morpheus? You're like, oh my god, I know exactly the game that I want to make for this.
I actually went to a game jam that was about how to use the positional tracking of VR, so what to do with moving of your head, and yeah, it just popped in like that. And I had a prototype within a few hours and knew it was fun. So then it was just about making the trappings of that interesting and. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you talk about what the challenges are of VR. I think it's more about that it's such a open. There's so much opportunity for new design and new interesting things that I'm not sure I would call it challenging yet. It's just this crazy discovery period that developers are on, and then players are going to be able to come along with us as we're figuring out all the, like I said, if I pitch to you, oh, it's a game about heading soccer balls with your controller, you would just laugh, but...
I'm going to strap a Vita to your face.
Right, exactly. I mean, there is opportunity for Vita strapping in other markets, but... yeah, but I think that there's just so many games that we haven't discovered yet that can be done in VR. And with Headmaster, I kind of actually think of it what would I do in real life when I'm designing it? My wife and I like to play games where we'll throw a wadded up piece of paper into a garbage can and compete over that. So the design is actually what would be fun to do if you had a soccer field all to yourself and you could put anything there and compete over it. And so then it's oh yeah, sure, I'll break a piñata with a soccer ball, or I'll have a carnival thing. And so I think a lot of
and it can explode too.
Yeah, sure, or exploding balls. I think a lot of it is about creating immersion for people and then breaking the rules of what they expect. There's a lot of opportunity there.
The one thing that's really hard to describe as we're trying to describe it is the scale becomes really important in VR. I mean, you can feel if you're small or really big in a game, which you really can't get with traditional games. So I think also right now it's a great time for small teams because we're just still trying to figure things out, and small teams can move real fast and
scale and speed, right? I mean, the other thing is that games have gotten faster and faster, and you look at how crazy Black Ops 3 multiplayer looks, where you're sliding backwards and you're jumping off a wall and shooting in the sky. And if you did that in VR, you would, in real life, if you were able to do that, you would probably not feel great afterwards because it's really terrifying for your body to be snapped in all those directions. So slowing games down, which sounds like it wouldn't be exciting, but actually being in that world, that actually still feels really cool. And these small teams are, solving problems with us every day we send, hey, there's a new software development kit out, it fixes these 3 things. And they're oh, we found these 10 problems, and here's how I solved it, and they're all kind of working together. It's really awesome. It's fun to be in a crazy experimental place.
Yeah, I mean, the trailers don't give you a sense of the field of view you have when you actually play it. You can see a lot more than what's on the screen there, so that's one thing. You mentioned scale is another thing. Things that, you can see a dinosaur on the television, but then when you see a dinosaur in virtual reality, you suddenly realize how big that actually is. And then the last thing I think that's really important is the sense of space. TV, always things are remote from you. But in VR, things can be right next to you, and they can really feel like they're in your own personal space. And that's a very powerful feeling.
Yeah, and it also could be uncomfortable, too. I mean, in our game, we have a giant robot that you feel the scale of it. If you get too close, you feel the robot getting in your personal space, which is not something you feel in games, being uncomfortable in your personal space.
And there's a lot of interesting science about what's going on, too. So you could have that robot right in your face, and then the rest of your brain will feel the heat off him, or you'll feel there's all these tricks that your brain starts playing on you, and that you actually start to believe it in an odd way. Yeah, very cool.
The interrogator in the heist blows a cigarette at you, and we had someone in the office who's allergic to cigarette smoke start just coughing uncontrollably. And I was he's not, there's no smoke. And he's I'm allergic to cigarette smoke. I'm I know, but there is no cigarette smoke. But his brain thought there was, which is weird.
How many of these experiences, Dr. Marsh, you think are going to be things you can do sitting down on the couch versus being up there and active? I mean, it feels as you said, there's a wide range of stuff. Even I remember one of the first demos I saw, you were in just this dive tank with a shark around you, and it's just you're not really even doing anything. You're just looking, and as you said, it's fully immersive, and you sort of you walk to the back because the shark is coming up. But where do you think the experiences are going to run the gamut? Or some you're going to be sitting down, some you're going to be more active, some you're going to use move controls. I guess it's depending on the concept?
Yeah, I think we were really seeing game creators try to explore all the different things that Morpheus lets them do. And, there's other awesome VR platforms that are in the works right now, too. Then they're trying to make everything work together, which is fun for fans. But a lot of the games, you talked earlier about how where do you start? A lot of the games start with cockpit games, right? So Eve Valkyrie is a great one where you're flying a spaceship and dogfighting in space. And it feels really natural. You're sitting on your couch, like the TV was in front of you playing a game, but now when you look around, instead of seeing the laundry you haven't folded yet, you see like the left half of your spaceship. And that's pretty rad. And then you have games like Headmaster where you can stand up and you can headbutt, or you can do that sitting down, and then stuff like The Heist, which is a fully mobile game where it's tracking where you are in space. You have 2 move controllers that are your hands, and it gets kind of bonkers. But I think we're looking to support whatever game creators can come up with that's still safe and fun for people to do. No sprinting simulators where you run towards your television at high speeds.
But the kind of neat thing about PlayStation is we do have that range of offering. I mean, you have the DualShock, which is great for those driving games, and then you have the moves for more of a kind of interaction with your hands or something. And then you can just use your head for a lot of things. There's another game, Street Luge, that they made where you just feel like you're riding on a luge, and all you do is tilt your head left and right to steer, and that's real easy to control too.
But one of the things that's actually, you talk about input, right? So we talk about DualShock 4, and we're very much talking about single-player games. One of the things that Morpheus has that I think really makes it cool and unique is we have a demo of Monster Escape somewhere here, which is one of our Worldwide Studios teams, and in that, like you would play at home, like my favorite part about VR is showing people for the first time and talking them through it. Is I'm like, no, touch the radio and like turn the volume up to this dance music in this car, and they're like, why am I able to do this? In Monster Escape, it's that social experience of sharing with your friends. So one person is a monster inside this headset, and they're smashing through buildings and coming to the end, and the other 4 players control little characters who are throwing things at the monster, and he's like dodging, exploding barrels, but you really have a 4 versus 1 experience where someone inside the Morpheus sees one thing and the other players on the TV see a separate thing. So it's still your living room gaming experience with multiple friends, but one person has sort of a different experience, a little asymmetric. It's the kind of thing that because we are a console plugged into your television, with your stereo speakers already hooked up, we have some really cool opportunities to do weird things in games like the social screen.
Yeah, I would say for Headmaster, that was the thing that really made me want to have it on the platform, was knowing that as one person sitting there trying to hit targets with their head and a soccer ball, other people can root them on, and it ends up being a social experience in the same way that it would be if you were doing it in real life, like if you were competing over something, and it really gets a lot of laughs, like being able to see that.
And watching that, like you headbutt the last ball and it's rolling towards the target, and you almost have 3 stars, and we did it at GDC, and I remember Adam, like the last ball, like finally tipped it over, and the whole room went, like freaked out, and that's not possible unless you can kind of see what is inside that headset. It's never the same as wearing it, but it's pretty fun.
So, Dr. Marks, the actual Morpheus hardware of the headset, I know we don't have one here on stage, but you guys have probably seen photos of it, or it's this really kind of interesting white contraption. Tell us about the development of that, because you're putting something on someone's head, you got to think about the weight, you got to think about the audio, all those other things. How did you guys come up with sort of the form factor or the way that it's sort of going to attach to the person?
Well, I mean, we're a consumer electronics company, so we always care about those kind of things from the start. So from the beginning, we wanted it to feel as comfortable as possible. So we didn't want anything pressing on your face. That's a big no-no. So instead, all the weight is balanced. It's a balance, so if you hold it with your finger, it'll just be balanced. And it sits on top of your head, and all the weight is on top of your head. And if you wear glasses, the front part can move away to support wearing glasses. So all those things are really designed in from the beginning. So we have really good ergonomic guys in Japan that Araki-san is the mechanical designer who has spent a lot of time, and he's still tweaking the final little bits of it to make it as robust as possible for mass market.
And also this one, as you probably realize, or you may not know, it's like this will work just with your PlayStation 4, so it's not like you have to buy a separate system, right? I mean, it sort of will build on top of the existing PS4, which for developers too, I'm sure is exciting that you sort of know the exact specifications of the machine that you're going to be building to.
Yeah, I know at home I have my big beefy gaming PC next to my Wii U and PlayStation 4. Like I have everything there, but a lot of people don't have the kind of crazy hardware that needs to power it, and luckily the PlayStation 4 seems like it's strong enough to power most of these games. I don't know how your experience has been making stuff for it.
I was amazed that it works on there. I was really pleasantly surprised, and we've recently added move support to the game, and it just works. So
you mean like yesterday also?
Yeah, yesterday.
Like literally 2 days ago.
After E3,
Yeah, ease of use for us is kind of overloaded because for our customers, they can just go and buy it and plug it into the PS4 and it works. There's no like drivers and things like that. That's one side. But the developer side is like you can get some middleware and it's already supported. Morpheus works. You know exactly what somebody's going to run it on, you know, so it can target the experience to be exactly what you want.
You can focus on making the game and not worrying about, well, can this person's GPU put out enough frames to make it not, because frame rate, to get like super nerdy, but it, you know, how smooth the world looks as you turn your head and how quick that refresh rate is
perfect.
Yeah, it's one of those things that makes you not feel great, and you know, really locking it at a really smooth looking frame rate helps a lot.
Right. So when you guys are, you know, developing VR titles, you know, you're sort of developing something that's not going to come out until 2016, so it'll be next year when people will be able to get Project Morpheus. How much more sort of iteration do you think is there to go on these games? I mean, you're probably, as you said, discovering new things kind of every, you know, couple days or couple weeks on this. Where do you see VR going, like between now and, you know, this time next year or whatever when it's out? Like, you know, how do you think your game's going to change?
That's a really good question. I mean, I've been doing VR for the last 10 months, and even that time, we do a lot of game jams. Game jams are a really good way to get a lot of developers together and just exchange ideas, and we've seen a lot of new ideas come through even in the last 10 months, and I actually don't know where it's going to all go, but I know by the time Morpheus releases, we'll have some whole different idea of what is the game, you know. I don't know what the killer app is yet. I don't think anyone really does, but there's a lot of cool ideas coming out, and a lot of different ideas, more than I you know, would think so, starting out 10 months ago.
When you talk about being, you know, sort of working with other people in game jams and the idea of being inspired by other people who are creating in the space, and I think that's the most exciting thing about when the products are all launching in 2016 is seeing that launch slate, and there's going to be a bunch of really great games. I know we had like 17 games at E3, and we're going to have more and more to announce over the coming months, but there'll be a launch slate that'll be full of really fun experiences, and then there'll be a whole set of creators who see it and play those games and get inspired by those to go make other things. And so I think you're looking at, you know, really the ramp from launch is going to be amazing all the way through the next, you know, 2 years or so of people coming up with new ways to mess with stuff. And the next soccer ball headbutting game is just, you know, one college graduate away
The
from
heading genre.
Yeah, exactly, the heading genre. New tag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all the tools are also, all the middleware and the Unity, the Unreal, the different game engines that we use are all supporting it, and everyone's behind it right now. It's like a real, like, it's a whole lot of people, a whole lot of smart people in the space right now pushing VR, and it's a really exciting time.
We're going to ask you about like non-game applications because all of us, you know, play games, but there's lots of talk about like, well, what's, you know, a virtual chat room going to look like in VR, or what's like a real estate tour going to look like? I mean, there's like, you know, you're doing some cool stuff with NASA, and you had a demo of like, you know, like looking around Mars, right? And like, you know, we're not going to be there, or probably not, but we're going to be able to look around in 360 and.
I'm glad you left that door open just in case we all go to Mars. Like,
could happen, John.
This prize for this panel is we're all going to Mars. Get in the rocket.
We're actually on a rocket ship right now.
Oh
Here we
God.
go. Buckle your seatbelts.
We were in VR the whole time.
So, Dr. Marks, is that when you think of, you know, there are game applications, but there have even been VR experiences I've had where you can like watch a movie in VR and it feels like, you know, you could be on a plane and, you know, you feel like you have a 30-foot screen in front of you. I mean, do you think, are there other applications that are going to be really powerful for Morpheus that aren't just traditional games?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our focus as a company is games, especially right now, but the things you can do with it, there's so many different industries who are, you know, we're working with already on other things like just visualizing a space. You can imagine real estate, just going in and instead of having to drive to a house to look at it, you can just be there, decide if you want to go visit it or not. It's a really simple one, but one that will probably happen very quickly. Some of the people just want you to be able to experience their products, like, you know, like a car manufacturer. You just want to sit in that car and feel what it would be like to drive in that car, and then go test drive that car if you want to after that. So some really simple ideas will happen very quickly, and then there's some more advanced things, especially when you have people put together in VR, where, you know, you can have a concert in VR, and there's, you know, there's no limit to the number of people you can fit into a virtual space. So you could have a 100 million person concert, just something
You're calling the ball now? 100 million person concert?
Set the barriers now. But I mean, you talk about a lot of that stuff at the end is sort of almost on the video side, right? So you think about watching that amazing moment from the Avengers where there's like that slowdown in the trailer where they're all zoomed at the same time, and thinking about that in 360 space, being able to look around and see a character enemy behind you and experience things, you know, a different way based on your input. We talk a lot about what is a game and what is not a game in VR because it gets really confusing because the player interaction.
All interactive in some way. Yeah.
Exactly. The player interaction is so much more material when you are the cameraman, right? Like where you look is what you're seeing, and can that impact how the story is told? Can that impact what you end up catching that time. There's a show called Sleep No More in New York, which was like a Shakespeare thing staged in this huge building, and they didn't tell you where to go. It wasn't like a stage by stage. You could just walk around and see different scenes play out. And I think there's some really cool stuff in VR of like almost the replayability of video. Like you can replay a video game and get a different experience every time. But right now you watch video once and it's kind of that's it. But now could you see something that was behind you the whole time? You had no idea why that character was scared, right?
Yeah, VR is a lot more akin to like live theater, like you're saying. And Hollywood's really excited, but also like documentary people are excited too, to give you more of a feeling that you're actually experiencing these things that they're talking about.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's only going to get more exciting because there's, this is all sort of stuff that isn't even commercially available, but will be, in the next year or two, we'll see a lot of this stuff. We've got about 10 minutes left. If you guys have questions, I don't mean to hoard the stage. If you have questions, put your hands up and we can get them in front of these guys. We got mics that we're going to pass around, and we can start right there and move across the room. Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. For Headmaster, I actually got the highest score. It was really fun. Exciting. I hit that.
Is there a question, or are you just bragging?
Well,
you are now the world champion.
A little brag and a little question. Okay. So how has it been just working for PlayStation?
Yes, I would like to know this as
well. Seriously, it's been amazing, and I think in a lot of ways it's because we're all on a journey together. And that sounds a little campy, but we're really all figuring out VR together. John says for 2 years. I think for 20 years we're going to be figuring out all the cool things that we can do. And so it's like they're supporting people like me who want to take a shot at making something that's totally out there. And then I think that the relationship is just such a fit that it's just been really great.
All right, thanks.
Cool. We'll just pass it down the row to her. Yeah. Go to her in the front. Yeah. Slowly move across.
Hi. One of the things I was really curious about is the live theater aspect of it, and I know some VR companies are starting to work with like Cirque du Soleil and stuff like that. And I was wondering if PlayStation was specifically working with any certain theater groups to bring live performances to the VR experience.
We're working with some live performance people. I don't know about theater groups in particular, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it's more that there are tech companies working with theater groups to say, like, oh, we have this camera rig or this platform or this engine, and trying to get them sort of on board to that engine. And we're the platform maker, so we support anyone who wants to bring content that's, not super unfamily friendly, but like anyone who wants to bring content to our platform. And I think that we've talked to a lot of people. We went to Silicon Valley VR, which is a whole thing. But like the tech industry sort of showing up and being like, I have this camera rig, well, I have this camera rig, and what would work better for my show? So I'd say anyone who wants to create content, there'll be a path to get it on PlayStation. And I think there's a lot of really cool non-game apps and experiences that are coming down the road.
And we do some stuff on the tech side. So like, it's not obvious, but with audio, you have a full 360, whereas with video, you have a limited field of view. So audio is something they use in live performances all the time to draw your attention, or you have something flash, you can do it visually if you can see it. But so these techniques, we're trying to build up a set of techniques that people can use to tell stories, so we help explore those techniques.
Good question. All right. Pat, behind you actually, May. Oh.
So you guys had mentioned Unity 3D.
Mm-hmm.
How just curious what the development platform looks like for that, and how difficult VR is versus just interacting with a 2D flat panel screen.
Well, you found 2 Unity developers on stage right now. That should be a good question.
It's actually, if you were to get some hardware, it's not just making a cube in the world and then seeing it in VR. You're gonna geek out.
There's plugins already for it, so it's hit a button.
It's the coolest thing.
You should never tell people who buy video games that what we do is hit a button and
all
it
we do
works.
is this.
You're ruining it
just
for
works.
all of us.
Yes, you're welcome. Right.
Yeah, related to that, like at a game jam or a VR hackathon or something, in like one day, people can make an entire experience. It's amazing. It's crazy that you can just sit down and not have done anything, and all of a sudden there's a VR world that does stuff.
Ultimately, games have always been built a lot, recently at least built in 3D. So that's what's great about it. Whereas you're asking about like Cirque and those things, that's harder because it's like linear video is like usually shot from one perspective, and you can't always get 360 because there's a camera guy behind and lights. But yeah, in games, it's all these virtual worlds. So
yeah. And a lot of what is extra cool about VR is that your brain does so much work to make it fun for you. Like to see a cube or a sphere that you can interact with in any way is so fun. It doesn't matter if it is the most amazing looking thing. Like you'll attach to it because you're there. And so simple games can be super compelling in VR.
It's like being a baby all over again.
It honestly is. Let's
is
all be
where-
VR babies together.
This is where you're not going to be able to understand unless you actually get to try it, because if you ever have the opportunity, you have to try even the simplest demo, because it feels a lot different than seeing it on a screen.
Right.
Crazy. Cool. Yep, right there. Go for it.
Is there a minimum age requirement?
We haven't announced sort of the like health and safety specs, things like that. But I'd say anyone who's in their teens has been pretty good on the device so far. And as we finish the device, which isn't done yet, I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about that coming close to the first half of next year. But it's a good question. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure that everyone's brains are happy at the end of their VR experience.
Cool. Yep, go ahead. The guy has his mic in the back there. Yep.
So, my first experience with VR, I think, was Disney Quest. I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but it was custom installations with, you know, very expensive, very custom hardware for that time. But I remember I liked it a lot because they would tailor control interfaces to the games. Now, of course, PlayStation, it's a home console. It's already got the Move. It's already got the traditional controller. But do you think this will drive more control interface innovation for the home console market, you know, custom controllers, or even more redesigned controllers that would be applicable to VR games specifically as part of the PlayStation line?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're hitting on a really interesting point, which is mostly a question of is like people are immediately thinking about, I want to build a custom gun controller that I can hold. I want to build something, you know, magical that's like a dashboard for the spaceship that I'm flying. And I think that right now, because like the addressable market of it all, you'll want to at least also support, you know, a DualShock 4 so that someone who doesn't have the extra bonus controller can still play it. But even at E3, we showed some prototypes. I would say there are less projects like these are and more prototypes of people who are skunkworksing cool things. So we had one game called Verzoom, where you literally got on a bicycle, a stationary bicycle, and put a helmet on, and you pedaled a bike, and you moved through this world, and you were pedaling, and the faster you pedaled, the faster the horse you were riding ran. And then you could run through a set of wings and start flying as a Pegasus, and it was just insane. And it's things like that where someone might want to build a bike controller. And is that a thing we would ever have done for a TV before? Probably not, but VR makes it feel like you're there, and that's really a different thing.
Are you saying you're going to pack in a bike next year?
I'm saying yeah, I'm going to come to your house and install a bike in every house. That's my goal.
Yeah, I mean, we're the platform, so we are always trying to provide a set of interfaces that can apply to the most set of games.
Right.
But in the past, there's been things like Guitar Hero or something, and that's very custom interface, usually driven by a specific game, and I think that probably will be re-energized with VR.
Cool, good question. Let's go back there.
Kind of segueing off of his question, when this comes to market next year, is it just going to be the headset that's going to come with it, or is it going to come with like a pointer or a glove or something like that, like in the traditional VR experiences?
So right now we have the control schemes that you're sort of aiming towards. We've said we're going to support DualShock 4, and we'll probably support the Move controller, and head tracking itself, which does require the camera that works with the PS4. In terms of bundling and packaging and pricing and exact release date, I would love to answer your question.
You're going to announce it all right here, right?
Yeah, here's where we're going to do it. No. But I straight up don't know the answers to your question. Yeah, I think we're still looking at, as we finalize the headset and finalize the device, what makes most sense for the most people. But the nice thing is, you have a PS4 that will power it, and so that part of the purchase is already taken care of. So it's just what comes next, which is pretty exciting.
Cool.
Good question. Sorry.
Let's move down
PR
the front
spun
row
answer.
here for the last two questions. Oh my God.
Was that the air conditioning
Being
kicking
attacked.
on?
I don't know what happened.
If at home you probably couldn't hear
a
the
large
shuttering.
rodent just scurried through that pipe.
This is the immersion of being in a panel.
Please tell me
4D
we're in VR.
experience.
3D audio.
So I have a couple of questions. The first one is, do you think the production value of gaming is going to increase because you have a more immersive experience, and moving your head around, you're going to see a lot of things that are not normally rendered. So how is that going to work?
Are you
Is
saying
there going to be a lot more money involved in making games now?
Are you saying that because you're in VR, you're much more sensitive to seeing all the details of things? Is that really the
And
really
also
question?
like you can peer around corners that you normally can't really go using a controller because you're set in a path or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking sort of the world of, are you building a real wall or are you building a Hollywood flat, right? Where there's just like a set of plywood behind it. Yeah. And I think that you're seeing in a lot of the games sort of design constraints that are made to make it not more expensive in terms of cost or manpower to, we're going to survive this panel together, guys. I believe in us. It's getting scary.
It is getting cooler, though.
Yeah, it is getting cooler, so let's be happy for the air conditioning. You do want to have an additional layer of detail, so when you're really close to something, it feels like you know, building your puzzles inside of Wayward Sky, like you get right up in those puzzles. They need to look good. They can't look low poly and down, but it doesn't mean that you need to, you know, you're not making every object that was in a AAA game. You have to just be smart about what the player can get to, and then when they're there, it has to be higher detail and really well polished and well done. So it's
and to add to that, the real surprising thing about VR is stylization works great. Like, it doesn't have to be photorealistic, because when you get a feel of presence is the term we use a lot. When you feel like you're in a space, it could be, you know, cartoon graphics, and it still feels compelling.
And it's early days, but we've also found that people don't necessarily like want to just run through the world as fast as they can like they do in some traditional games. They actually show up in this space and they're like, wow, this is a cool space to be in, and they don't necessarily want to leave it really quickly. So spending more time on one space and having fewer spaces, I think, might be a way that a lot of developers go.
Do you mind if I ask my second question?
We only have 50 seconds left, so maybe there was someone else with a question in the front row, right? Yeah, maybe pass to him.
We'll hang out later. You can ask us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's this question here. Last question. Yep.
Yes. Pass it down. I'll tell you all the price points and stuff afterwards. Great.
I was just wondering, as part of your game development process, if you have any interesting challenges that you've encountered or lessons learned as part of the transition from moving for development on a TV to this fully immersive world in the last, sounds like the 10 months that you've been doing this?
I mean, I think that the short answer is yes, because it's a totally different world. But the really nice part about it is that the development community is kind of all on the train together and talking to each other. And so, like, Eka and I talk all the time about, oh, you know, I discovered this or that. And
Or talk about John.
Yeah, talk about John. But yeah, so there are challenges, but it's sort of like the whole community's moving ahead together, so it's really fun.
I will say a lot of my initial assumptions were completely wrong. So every time we start with, Ben and I have been making games for a long time, and so we go with certain assumptions, as all developers do, and then we try that out, and it's like, no, that doesn't work in VR. So we're kind of relearning or unlearning a lot of things too. I mean, and you really have to build something, test it out in the headset before it's really legit.
Yeah, and it's very counterintuitive how much you need to do to have fun. Like, Headmaster, you're standing in one place most of the time. The lights are going out, it changes, and then you get a new challenge. And I don't want to have a crazy, super detailed experience, because that is actually the fun thing that I've discovered right now. So simple experiences actually can be super compelling. Like, I'm a gamer, I play FPSs and stuff, but in VR, I'm like totally happy to play that.
Especially we find like physics is exciting in VR.
Physics is amazing.
Like just a little bit of things knocking each other over is really exciting. And
yeah, in the London Heist, I know we're up, but in the London Heist, I actually spent most of my time stacking the flashlight on top of clips and just playing with the physics, and the people that are watching me are like, "Come on, move on, buddy! Like, you gotta play the game, right?"
It's fun. All right, well, VR is coming your way next year in 2016 on PS4. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for coming to the panel, guys. Have a great Comic-Con and Nerd HQ. There's more coming up. I think Star Wars Battlefront is next, right? All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.